Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it is complicated. Now, at the end of the day, Nevada should work better than Iowa. Right. Because Iowa tried the app that Nevada had picked first. It didn't work, obviously, in a lot of different ways, which is why we still don't have the final results. So Nevada Democratic Party scrapped that idea, did this early caucusing idea, so you get so many that people can go in ahead of time with essentially just a piece of paper. You write your choices on there, first, second, and third, whatever, how far you went on that. That does simplify this process to a point. Now for these folks out there at these precinct leaders right now, they do have to take all those numbers and add them to the numbers for the people who show up today. As we look at these numbers coming in, Bernie Sanders doing particularly well when we're talking about just 2% of the numbers coming in. You're talking about a volunteer army of people all over the state with 2,000 precinct sites. This is a lot of expectation on these volunteers. They've gone through weeks of training to try to get up to this point. Your iPad can fail, as we all know. I mean, all kinds of things can go wrong. You can punch numbers in wrong. There's a lot coming at these people. There's a lot of tension in the room in some cases when you have candidates trying to remain viable and getting to that 15% that's necessary to be viable and have the chance to continue to the next round. So there's so much coming at these people, whether they're experienced at this or if they're a first timer. It's a lot to go through, especially when the process, this type of process, only happens every 4 years. But the way that it's happened this time has never happened with the ability to go early.
And we have more candidates on the ballot than before, 11, correct? Is it 11?
Yeah, there aren't that many still in the race, but yeah, as you can tell from the ticker, you have people who are still showing their allegiance to an Andrew Yang or a John Delaney, whoever it is, those who have all bowed out of the race.
And we also had the early voting for the 4 days that contributed. And
well, and it seems as though, according to our Carolyn Williams, who's over at Coronado High School, it's that early voting that might be a bit of an issue, at least at that specific precinct, because it's not as simple as just saying, I think this person should be president. There are the different choices that they have to make, and that all has to be factored in. It's not as simple as just saying person X wants person Y to be president. There's a formula attached to that.
Yeah, because as you fill out that preference card and go through the process, your choice may not have made it, may not be viable there, so they then have to move to the next one, potentially to the next one. So, I mean, it's just not a simple process. And so in this culture, this 24/7, I want it now kind of thing, the caucuses are not designed for that. I mean, they've been around for a long, long time, but speed is not their friend throughout this process, and that got exposed in Iowa. And we may see that here. You just can't get the results instantaneously because there's too much that goes into it.
Well, it's better to be right than to be fast.
And that's been their motto.
Yes, that's right. That's what John Summers has been saying all morning long. Now, you were warning us over the hours, listen, it's a very complex process of tallying the early votes, the 75,000, that is complex. And that seems to be what we're seeing could be the issue at that one particular.
And of course, you also have the confusion for those who filled out those preference cards to begin with but did them incorrectly. Then they got the warning that, hey, that doesn't count. You didn't do it. Maybe you forgot to sign it, for example, which is essential. You got to come back Saturday and do it in person. Well, if you have to work or you're sick or you don't want to go out in the rain, whatever it is, don't have childcare, a million different reasons, that's one more complication to this process, too.
Right, and 1,700 people did forget to sign, as we heard from Vanessa Murphy.
Let's take a little bit of a bigger look here, because we are talking about a race for the White House to some extent here. We see Bernie Sanders with a lead. Again, it's very, very early here. We talked about this a little bit earlier on, but let's again readdress which one of the candidates needs the big night, or which candidate needs to really get to a certain threshold here to stay viable moving forward to South Carolina?
Well, let's start with Bernie Sanders. Unless these early numbers are completely off, which it's hard to believe that it would turn out this way, but Bernie Sanders is the Democrats' frontrunner at this point. That's what we know after going through 3 states. I realize Iowa isn't finished yet, but it's either going to be Sanders or Pete Buttigieg who will end up receiving the most delegates in Iowa. Sanders is by far the front runner for this party. A long way still to go here. Then you start working your way down. Joe Biden really needs to have a good day. He had a terrible day in Iowa, a terrible day in New Hampshire, and he really needs something going before next Saturday and the South Carolina primary gets going. Elizabeth Warren, as you pointed out, people could could caucus early, but they couldn't take into account what became her really strong performance on debate night. Now, she's raised a bunch of money since debate night because she did so well, but how's that going to turn out here, and is that going to actually hurt her? For her, you would assume she needs to do really, really well for those folks who show up today, and we will see once people realign, will she prove to be a popular second choice for people to see if she can make it at least until that top 3. Pete Buttigieg, who did well in his first 2 states, same way with him. Now, money maybe hadn't been the same issue with him, but he hasn't been able to spend money for those Super Tuesday states and beyond as he's focused on those first 4. So he was strong raising money early on, but the money rate, I mean, it runs out. It's expensive to run for president. So there's some pressure on him as well. So you have a bunch of them who really want to be in the top 3. Amy Klobuchar has kind of moved on, doesn't expect to do well here, but is going to have to figure out something, South Carolina and beyond, to keep the money and the support coming in.
Thank you so much. You have been incredible helping us relay all this information to our viewers. And Brian and Denise will be picking your brain throughout the rest of the afternoon and early evening. I know. Take this time to go recharge,
Yes.
Dave.
We'll recalculate some numbers for you as well. So we're going to check in with Dave a little bit later on. But first, we should talk about the weather. Kirsten, here at about 2:45 on a Saturday afternoon, we've seen some rain move through the area. Here's your most accurate Weather Now forecast with Ted.
All right, guys, thank you so much. So many tower camps to go through. We'll continuously cycle through them every weather hit. This is our other one, Boulder Station, looking at the Las Vegas Strip. Notice the raindrops on the camera because, yes, the rain has picked up again. Not as intense again as what we saw this morning, but when you see these darker shades of green, that indicates some not only light rain, but just a little bit below the moderate rain. We're seeing that from the northwest part of the valley, all the way from the Strip, all the way down to Henderson, and even points westward. Look at this blue diamond getting hammered right now with some heavier rain bands. You can see it from the darker red core, including State Route 157, more snow in the mountains. Speaking of the mountains, I've been in close contact with them, and they sent me this latest video that we're going to put also on social media where you can see all that snow that's coming down right now. Can we go to that, guys? Can we show that video? There we go. All right. You can see the snow coming down at this hour. A lot of snowboarders up there. Again, there are some road restrictions. You want to call 511 for the latest before heading up there. You have to go through a four-wheel drive. So, of course, the snow continues to be falling down, and that will continue also for this evening. Zooming out. Still more rainfall from Mojave County, but it looks like the focus of attention now is the Las Vegas Valley. Like we said, we have isolated showers, isolated storm cells right now just west of the 15 near Sloan and down to South San Bernardino County, clearing up, at least right now. We'll continue to see that throughout this evening. So again, not done with the rain just yet. We knew that was going to happen. Temperatures in the mid-high 50s, cooler than yesterday. Some breezy winds at times outside with those storms nearby. And of course, we'll have another update coming for you very soon. In the meantime, that's the latest from here. John and Kirsten, over to you.
We're back.
All right. Yeah, we didn't let him go just yet, okay?
Before we swap out here, we should talk about the numbers. Again, we've gotten very limited results. It's still very early here in the caucus. We're going to look at the statewide numbers in a little bit, but these are the Clark County numbers, the delegates here for the Democratic caucus. Anything to extrapolate here, Dave?
Well, and that's what, truthfully, I didn't know enough about your population before coming out here, realizing that so many people live in Clark County.
Most of them do.
Most of the people in your state all live in one county. So this would seem to be an important barometer, perhaps, of where things are going. I am curious, it's so early here, but because Tom Steyer hasn't performed well in the first 2 states, we'll see if this has any staying power to it. But these early numbers have shown him hanging on there in third. He's spent a ton here, millions of dollars, but he's been hanging on there. Then you kind of get to the second tier. You don't expect Amy Klobuchar to really do much, but we'll see where Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren can do. These are the Clark numbers, and you can see that they're 4 and 5 here, but still bunched up, and you're only 2% of the way in. And as you broaden it out to the statewide numbers here, mirroring what we've seen in the early Clark numbers, it's a Sanders, Biden, Steyer top 3, but Sanders is so far out ahead. And that will be a storyline that'll come out of here, that if he really dominates this place, that'll give him just an added boost where he's running essentially neck and neck with Biden in South Carolina.
You know, it's interesting also, we talk about Bernie Sanders, the senator, being far up in front in these early numbers. This is 3%, the statewide numbers. I imagine, it seems as though maybe you would agree, the real race is the race for second place.
Yeah, the race for second and third, which is, you know, sometimes it's kind of crazy the way politics works, but Bernie Sanders may not get as much attention coming out of here because he was expected to win. So if you follow a lot of the national storylines coming out of here, to your point, undoubtedly much will be made of who finishes in second and third, in particular about how it happens. If it is Joe Biden, then the stories are going to come back out. See, he's not finished yet, and then he does well here. He can get a boost in South Carolina. Maybe he's got a shot to get the nomination. So the look at who finishes in second and third could go a long way.
Again, thank you so very much for your insight. We're going to be switching over coverage with Denise and Brian, and you will be staying put there, Mr. Price.
We'll keep an
A
eye on
long
the,
night ahead.
We'll keep an eye on the numbers from the Nevada Caucus. We thank you for joining us so far for our coverage. More coverage coming your way in just a few moments. Stick with us here at 8 News Now.
coverage at caucus locations across the valley. Welcome to the Nevada 2020 caucus coverage with your host, Brian Loftus and Denise Valdez.
And thank you for staying with us on 8 News Now. Welcome to our comprehensive caucus coverage. And this is an exciting part. I'm Brian Loftus, and Denise, results just starting to come in.
Yeah, ideally, most of these caucus locations should be wrapping up at around 3. Really kind of depends on what their turnout is. But we are getting some early numbers, so let's show those to you right now. We're going to break these down first off statewide by delegate count. These are the numbers we know for sure. And this is just 3%, right? So it's pretty early. But look at Bernie Sanders with this strong lead at 55%. Joe Biden really needed to come on strong here in Nevada. He hasn't done well in Iowa or New Hampshire. Right now he's coming in at second place with 18%. Elizabeth Warren here at 9%, rounding out the top 3.
And Pete Buttigieg, the former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, standing at 9%. Tom Steyer, who spends so much money in Nevada as well as South Carolina, at 7%. Amy Klobuchar just polling at 1%. With the statewide numbers that are just coming in. Again, this is only 3% of Precinct statewide reporting.
So now let's break it down here by Clark County, a little closer to home. Of course, again, Bernie Sanders with a very strong, comfortable lead at this point, 51%. Joe Biden, though, doing very well with 23%. He's still in Nevada and will be in Las Vegas here tonight, along with Pete Buttigieg with 10%. Again, this is our top 3 just in Clark County, but only 3% in so far, Brian.
And Elizabeth Warren, Denise, at 8% in the Clark County delegate count. Also, Tom Steyer polling our percentage in at 8%. And Amy Klobuchar, very disappointing in the state of Nevada, just 1%, again, just with 3% in.
So we're bringing in our political expert here who survived Iowa. This is Dave Price. He's going to be giving us analysis throughout the afternoon and into the evening. So we did our 8 News Now Emerson poll a little bit just yesterday. And the numbers are pretty much in line with what we're seeing tonight for Bernie Sanders. But it's really Joe Biden who really needs to come on strong here in our state.
Yeah, without a doubt, since he did so poorly in both Iowa and New Hampshire, and the debates have not really been his thing either. Mm-hmm. So for him, he really wanted to come out and show some kind of strong performance. As you mentioned, these are really, really early, these numbers, 3% in. But if he could have a day here where he comes away with a second, he's going to be feeling good.
Dave, are you surprised at all Mayor Pete Buttigieg doing so well in New Hampshire as well as Iowa, coming in second and possibly first? I know Iowa is still working through the results with a recount that's actually planned for Tuesday of this week. But with those early numbers coming in, are you surprised at all that he is so low in terms of the 3% precinct reporting and the numbers being so low?
I was curious how he would fare here. What we saw in Iowa, and I believe he has mimicked some of the same game plan here, was to focus on some of the smaller counties where perhaps Bernie Sanders wasn't focused as much. In Iowa, it worked. So if you start looking at the numbers from Iowa, in some of the bigger Democratic pockets across the state, Bernie Sanders did very well, and Pete Buttigieg did well in those smaller areas. Very similar to what somebody did back in 2008 when Barack Obama ran, and he kind of snuck up on people doing that. Things have really changed since then, but Buttigieg decided to almost try to repeat that. So doing that same philosophy and moving on here to Nevada, at least as we look at some of these early numbers, it hasn't translated. Now, in your poll that you mentioned that came out yesterday, he was a very solid number 2. Right. And so with 3% in, we don't want to, we don't want to overanalyze these early numbers. But the early numbers right now show that he's a little further back.
All right, a little bit later, we're going to talk about some of the other candidates as well, especially Tom Steyer, who spent so much money in Nevada, to see if he's happy with what he's done so far in Nevada. So we'll bring you back here in just a second. We're going to get out to Vote Central, which is where Orko Manna is this afternoon and has been for the last few hours. I dare I say it's been fairly smooth, but you don't want to jinx anything. So let's check in with Orko now to see how things are coming along. Orko?
Yeah, Denise and Brian, we were here at Vote Central where we're expecting those votes to continue to come in throughout the afternoon and evening. We, of course, will update everyone when we have more information. As you guys mentioned, some of those early precincts have been reporting numbers in. Bernie Sanders seems to have quite a big lead at the moment. Again, only a couple % of precincts reporting. And we've also heard that there is a website that Nevada State Democratic Party is updating information on. And right now, that website seems to have no results, but we are still making sure to check that website to make sure that there will be results on there. Of course, everyone is thinking about Iowa, what happened there, as Dave mentioned, and so we are, as we've reported, we are saying that the Nevada State Democratic Party scrapped their plans to use the same app that the Iowa caucus used. Instead, they're using iPads with caucus calculators, which will add in-person caucus results to the early voting numbers. As you mentioned, from what we've heard, pretty smooth sailing. At this point, there are a couple locations that maybe there have been a little bit of some issues. Volunteers can text or call those results here to Vote Central. We also saw some volunteers bringing caucus materials here to Vote Central. I spoke to the candidates, including Senator Bernie Sanders, if they're confident about what will happen here in Nevada.
Is no great secret, Iowa was a disaster, an unmitigated disaster. I certainly hope that that is not repeated here in Nevada, and I hope the Democratic Party has their act together and can give us accurate and prompt election returns.
Again, prompt being the key word there. As you guys mentioned, the early voting results are starting to come in at this moment. We are expecting in the next couple of hours, hopefully, to get more of those results for you. But again, to recap, Bernie Sanders right now seems to have the large lead. For now, reporting live at Vote Central here at the Rio, Orko Manna, 8 News Now.
Orko, thank you. Denise was making the point before we went live to Orko Manna about the spending of Tom Steyer.
Yeah.
Of course, you have Mayor Mike Bloomberg spending the most. He's at about numbers between 465, 470 million, and it changes by the day.
Right, he's not even on the Nevada
Yeah, it
ballot,
depends what
right.
time of day we're talking. Tonight it could be 500, but Tom Steyer, as of this morning, was $254 million. Most of it right here in Nevada, and of course in South Carolina, which will be pivotal next week. And you have to think that with the early precincts not coming in, just 3%, a little bit disappointing in terms of states that he put so much focus, so much attention, and really so much money into.
So he's coming in the top 3 roughly as we're looking at some of that delegate count. Let's bring in Dave right now. So is it something about okay, so I want to make sure that George is set, so we're digital here. Dave, hold that thought, because we're going to ask you if we think Tom Steyer is satisfied with what his performance is tonight. And we'll toss it over to George, along with Annette Magnus and Fernando Romero, to see what they think about some of these early numbers so far. Just 3%, George. What's
well,
early?
That's a great question. We'll start with that. Annette, you worked, you know the Tom Steyer campaign.
Yep.
He's spent a lot of money. He's well known here. Maybe the only place he's known better is in California. And is this it for him if he doesn't do well? Or?
No, I mean, he has spent a lot of money in South Carolina too, and I think you see him move on to South Carolina and see where he goes from there. Obviously, I think most of these folks are probably going to be in it at least through Super Tuesday, because that'll be the big test of where they go from there. You know, I think that you're seeing many people voted for Tom Steyer here, but maybe they're within their precinct, he wasn't viable, so their vote then went to somebody else. And so, you know, that does get into the question of whether or not to have a primary versus a caucus, because instead of that direct democracy, maybe your first choice, second choice, third choice wasn't viable, and so it moves on to the next candidate. And so that's something that we have to take into consideration here as well.
So things have gone pretty smoothly so far. Now it gets tricky, though, where you do the math and decide who gets how many delegates. Are you concerned about where it ends up, or you think it's going pretty well so far?
Well, I think it's going pretty well. I am concerned, obviously, as everybody else would be, as to where it ends up. But just to kind of finish off on Tom Steyer, I think he just started a little too late. He was there from the start, talking about impeachment, but he was not a candidate. And when he became a candidate, it was, you know, so many people were already in the race. I think many people had already chosen the person that they would support. And so consequently, even though he did and has done a lot to get inroads into the community, it may be a little more difficult for him now.
Fernando, you had mentioned before we were on television earlier in our coverage that Tom Steyer, you'd seen evidence of him being really active. Give me a description of where the candidates rank in terms of a ground game starting with Tom, I guess, but who's really been out there talking to your voters?
Well, I think at this point, I would say Tom would be number one. As far as he has had more outreach programs, he has been out pressing the flesh. He has had meetings in people's homes, and every day. And as I said before, I live in the barrio, and every single day he sends out a postcard reminding us of what's going on. The problem, as I said again, is that he simply started too late.
You know, I really wished, watching television the last couple of weeks, if I could only own a TV station for 2 weeks, that'd be awesome. Because, oh my gosh, the airways are filled.
He would have paid for it already.
Yeah, that's right.
So give me your take on that on ground game and then on advertising, because, wow, suddenly everybody's on the air.
Everybody wants to be in Nevada. Yeah, so I think Fernando's 100% right. Tom Steyer has spent a tremendous amount of money here, and I think that's why a lot of people supported him, is he actually was in our community and talking to people and not taking us for granted. But then you look at people like Elizabeth Warren. I think Elizabeth Warren has had one of the strongest ground games from the very beginning. She was the first one to set up a campaign here in Nevada. She's had a strong team here from the beginning. I know the Sanders campaign has had numerous organizers here on the ground. They've had a fabulous campaign on the ground. So you have to give them credit for that, absolutely. And they hired really smart staff. Both Warren and Bernie hired very smart staff here on the ground. And so those things also have to be taken into consideration. I think Mayor Pete's campaign started late here, but hired fabulous staff and really kind of hit the ground running once they had that. And so I think that's why you're seeing the results you're seeing today. Obviously, Biden has had a stronghold here in Nevada. He's very well known. He's always been well liked among communities of color, and so I think you see some of that support coming through. And he hired Ivana Cancela, Senator Ivana Cancela, and that's a huge win for him.
Yeah, tremendous competition for the Hispanic vote. Of course, it's 30% of Nevada's population. I don't know what it is a percentage of the registered voters, but you know, we've seen all these candidates showing up at taco shops and Hispanic businesses. Who's made the best run at Hispanic voters, Fernando, in your estimation?
I think the bottom line in it would be Bernie. First of all, he had 4 years start. And so starting with that, he got people who had worked for him before, who had supported him before. So he had a ground game already going. And then, as I mentioned before, that he brings in you know, heavyweights such as Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez and Maria Cruz to work on his campaign, speak for him, and be his surrogates. He has done really good strides within the community. And again, that 4-year start is something else.
Fernando, Annette, thank you very much. Back to you.
All right, thanks so much, you guys. Very interesting how much money you spend and if it ever really pays off for you.
Will it work?
That's what we're looking at.
You always find out with voters.
Yes.
And we're going to be finding out today, Tuesday in South Carolina, after the debate there, and of course, Super Tuesday. According to a new CBS News entrance poll, Bernie Sanders leading both men and women in initial preference, but there is a bit of a generational divide. Take a look. Sanders is currently getting 56% of the support of women that are under the age of 45. However, women 45 and older, they're divided. Here are those results showing Mr. Biden and Sanders neck to neck, with Amy Klobuchar not too far behind. Pete Buttigieg and Warren with 15% or less, and then Tom Steyer falling in last place there. The age divide is similar in men under the age of 45, with Sanders also doing quite well. Men 45 and older show Sanders with a slight edge of 24%. That compared at 21, Biden at 21, and then Buttigieg following with 18%.
So CBS also talked to voters about some of the things that were most important to them, right? Here's some of what the voters had to say. 4 in 10 said healthcare was the most important issue, and we heard a lot about that in the debate, and of course that's a big issue with the culinary union here locally as well. The other issues important to them, climate change and then income inequality. That is something that Bernie Sanders has been driving home for months. The other 2 issues here, 6 in 10 say support single government health care plan, also very important, and 8 in 10 people are confident their votes will be counted correctly. You know, thank goodness, I think a lot of Democrats are saying, thank goodness they decided to early vote, because that was 75,000 people that they got out of the way in 4 days.
Yeah, and I hope that after what happened in Iowa, I hope if things continue to go well in Nevada and overall it is deemed a success, it can kind of restore some confidence in people that have questions about, you know, making sure my vote counts and the process and things of that nature.
Right. That early voting saved our bacon. You know?
No doubt. Aren't your numbers fascinating in the sense that when you look at Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg, Buttigieg could be Sanders' son.
Right.
age
In
was,
age,
right?
right.
He
So
wrote a
Buttigieg
paper
is-
about it back in college.
Exactly, which he points out, you know, to remind everybody how much older. And Sanders is 78, Buttigieg is 38. Yet when you look at those numbers that you just showed, the younger crowd goes with Sanders. The younger crowd does not go with Buttigieg. It's the older folks who have started to latch on, middle age and above, who've gone with Buttigieg. It's been such a fascinating dynamic, and that started in our state, and it's continued through.
And what's so interesting about what you just said is the younger crowd goes with Bernie, but in previous elections, will the younger crowd turn out and vote? We got to wrap this up, and we're going to head over back and be on television shortly. Thanks for watching us on 8newsnow.com. Put on Channel 8, the hoops is over, and our coverage continues right here on 8 News Now.
All eyes shift to Nevada as voters weigh in on their Democratic candidate. With a crowded field, every vote matters.
My administration, my cabinet will look like America.
We put this together from the ground up.
It's time for us to get up.
And change is due.
I believe that this is the year.
I think that we need a president that can actually get things done.
8 News Now is your local election headquarters with live team coverage at caucus locations across the valley. Welcome to the Nevada 2020 caucus coverage with your host, Brian Loftus and Denise Valdez.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our caucus day coverage. The eyes of the country are on Nevada as we pick our presidential candidates today. I'm Denise Valdez.
And I'm Brian Loftus. We have reporters at caucus locations across the valley, at the Rio Hotel Casino, at the Bellagio, at Rancho High School, Liberty High School, and much more. And we have a studio full of analysts here to break down the results as they come in and tell us what it all means. Welcome to caucus coverage on 8 News Now. Results are just coming in with about 3% of precincts reporting at this time. We're going to get you through some of the early results.
I believe we're going to start with some of the statewide delegates at this point. And Brian, you mentioned it. This is just 3% of the precincts coming in. And Bernie Sanders here with a very comfortable, solid lead with 55%. The top three here, Joe Biden with 18% and Elizabeth Warren with 10%.
Following that, in fourth place in the statewide delegate count is former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg, standing at 9%. Tom Steyer, who we know spent a lot of money in the state of Nevada, at 8%, and Amy Klobuchar trailing with just 2%.
Let's see if we've got our Clark County numbers here that we can show you as some of these precincts now start to roll in these early numbers. If we have them, we'll pop them up for you. So again, the Bernie Sanders, it's very reflective, except with Buttigieg here with them coming in at number 3. Bernie Sanders with 51%, Joe Biden with 23%, and Pete Buttigieg with 9%. This is in Clark County only.
Following the top three, you have Tom Steyer again at the same number as he's standing at statewide, and that is in Clark County, 8% for Mr. Steyer. Elizabeth Warren standing at the same place at 8%, and Amy Klobuchar so far disappointing with just 3% of the precincts reporting and garnering just 1% of the Clark County vote.
So ideally, they were supposed to be wrapping up at 3 o'clock this afternoon with all of our precincts across the state. There were 7 caucus locations, for instance, on the Strip. Those ones did not work in the early voting, and they have now wrapped up. So Kate Houston has moved from the Bellagio to the newsroom tonight. And earlier today, you were at the Bellagio telling us how it was going and talking with voters as they were exiting. Kate?
Yes, Denise and Brian, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders both received delegates from that caucus location. There were 51 in total. Now, there were 123 voters at the location this morning. Each candidate needed 19 in order to be considered viable. At the beginning, we saw groups for Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, and Elizabeth Warren. After the first alignment, Warren did not have enough votes to be considered viable. One of her supporters did tell us that they decided to join Joe Biden's preference group. We'll hear more from him coming up later on in our 5 o'clock show. But a lot of the people that were at that location were workers from all around the Strip. Today, Nevada Democrats told us they did that on purpose.
We don't all work 9-to-5 jobs here. We have a lot of people who work, very different hours, overnight hours. So we wanted to set up caucus sites on the Strip where shift workers could come in, maybe take a little bit of time off of work, caucus, and then get back to work for the employers who are letting them, take a little bit of time off.
Many of the workers there were from the Bellagio as well. Now, in the end, Joe Biden's preference group elected 19 delegates to the county convention. Bernie Sanders' preference group elected 32 delegates. There was an uncommitted group with 2 members, but they will not be electing any delegates to that county convention. Back to you.
All right, it's been a busy Saturday here in Nevada. Early voting, of course, this was for this caucus really no exception. This was the first time ever a caucus has ever even tried early voting, and a lot of people actually took advantage of it. There were more than 75,000 early voters over those 4 days, including about half of those on the final day. They ranked between 3 and 5 different choices. They did a paper ballot similar to like a Scantron, if you remember those back in the day. Lines were several hours long in some places those first few days. That by itself nearly equaled the total number of voters that we saw in the 2016 Democratic caucus. That was at about 84,000 when there was no early voting. So a lot of people just kind of spreading it out over 4 days as opposed to a bunch of people on one day.
Do I remember Scantrons? I'm still trying to forget. So how the heck does a caucus work, and how does early voting get worked into it? Vanessa Murphy makes it very clear with an animation to show you the process.
Caucus goers gather and then head to the section of the room for their candidate of choice for what's called the first alignment. Think of it as a first round. Then early votes need to be incorporated. If a candidate does not have 15% of the votes, they do not move on to the next round. Supporters of the remaining candidates can try to convince caucus goers to join them. Then the second alignment takes place. Again, early votes are incorporated. And based on those results, caucus math is done. There is a special formula to use to figure out how many delegates would be assigned for each candidate.
So that's how basically the caucus works. And as we know, Nevada Democrats had to quickly change course after the app they had planned on using failed in the Iowa caucuses. The I-Team's Vanessa Murphy has been on top of those changes since they first started about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, right now, she is out at the Vote Central location for Democrats. That is at the Rio Hotel Casino. Hi there, Vanessa.
Hi there. Yeah, we saw some volunteers coming here to drop off their caucus materials starting as early as 2 p.m. around that time. What that means? Results. Now, a spokesman for the Nevada State Democratic Party tells me that would be the final step in the reporting process. First, at the precinct or caucus location, they call a hotline to report results. Then they take a photo of how they've recorded the results and text that, and then they bring their materials here. By 12:30, we're told about 1,000 volunteers were using the caucus calculators. We did hear concerns about a lack of volunteers at some locations, but a spokeswoman for the Nevada Democrats insists the vast majority of locations were fully staffed with volunteers. The goal was to have 8 volunteers at each location. So back here live, we are standing by waiting for results. We know that you are hearing results, but we are expecting to see those results on a screen behind me. We also have a website to check them. So again, we are standing by. I know there are also concerns about some confusion at some precinct locations. A short while ago, I asked a spokesman for the Nevada State Democratic Party about that. He said he had not heard those concerns yet. Again, we are standing by at Voter Central. Reporting live at the Rio, Vanessa Murphy, 8 News Now.
All right, Vanessa, thank you. One man very familiar with caucus coverage and sometimes caucus chaos is a political director from our affiliate in Des Moines, Iowa. His name is Dave Price. He's been here all day and will continue and helping us out with our caucus coverage. And Dave, so far, is there anything you're seeing from the candidates and from the early numbers? And I emphasize early, just 3% of precincts reporting that is really jumping out or standing out to you.
I think the margin that we're seeing early on from Bernie Sanders to the rest of the pack is a tremendous amount right now. You're only talking about 3% in most cases of the early numbers, but this would be a dominating performance if he can do double digits or bigger, and that's the way it looks so far. And you wonder if in the end, maybe Michael Bloomberg has actually been a help to Bernie Sanders in the sense that that gives Sanders a foil here.
Well, that's a great point. Wednesday night, everybody was going at Mayor Bloomberg. Bernie just kind of stood there and watched it and sometimes participated in that process. So really no one was looking at the top leader. And again, with 3%, 51% already garnered by Sanders. So we'll see if that continues as more and more precincts come in. Now, according to a new CBS News entrance poll, and we'll move on to that entrance poll, Bernie Sanders is leading both men and women in initial preference, but there's a bit of a generational divide. Take a look. Sanders currently getting 56% of the support of women under the age of 45. However, women 45 and older, they are divided. Here are those results showing Biden and Sanders neck to neck, with Amy Klobuchar not too far behind. Buttigieg and Warren with 15% or less, and Steyer is in dead last with 12%. The age divide is similar in men under the age of 45, with Sanders also doing really well. And men 45 and older show Sanders with a slight edge of 24%. That compared to Biden at 21, and Buttigieg follows with 18%. There's a quiz later on all of this. I hope you got all of those numbers. Anything stand out to you? We were talking off air about how Bernie does appeal so much to young voters.
Well, and you just see those trends go from Iowa now here to Nevada, that Sanders does so well with the younger crowd. Buttigieg, the youngest person in the race, it's middle-aged and older where he does well. And if you go to a Joe Biden event, it tends to be a more experienced crowd, let's say. So the older folks more attracted to Biden. So state to state, it seems like some of these trends are holding.
Said rather diplomatically there. And another CBS News entrance reflects what our own polling showed. About 40% said health care was the most important issue. That followed by about a quarter of people saying climate change, then income inequality. 6 in 10 support a single government health care. As for avoiding what happened in the state of Iowa, 8 in 10 said they are confident their votes will be counted correctly. Hopefully what happens in Iowa stays in Iowa.
Indeed.
Okay. We're going to send it over to Denise.
I was waiting for that line, Brian. We'll be right back. We're going to show you what the Republicans are doing today. They're also busy. They made Donald Trump the nominee from Nevada as well. And his campaign staff, everyone is in town. We'll check in from their meeting in Pahrump coming up right after this.
Welcome back to our coverage. Democrats, of course, are caucusing today, but Republicans have already decided who their nominee will be, sitting President Donald Trump, of course.
So today, the Nevada Republican Central Committee held a meeting where they voted to give all of their delegates to Donald Trump. Hector Mejia is out at the Pahrump Nugget, where that meeting is underway right now. Hector?
Hey there, Denise and Brian. The Nevada GOP made it official about 45 minutes ago, becoming the first in the West to award their Nevada delegates to President Donald Trump. And just a few minutes ago, Trump's campaign manager, Brad Parscale, was here talking to the crowd, thanking them for the delegates. Pretty significant for them. Members here of the Nevada Republican Central Committee rallied behind President Trump, planting their flag, hoping to turn Nevada red again. And because Trump was the only nominee without a challenger within his party here in Nevada, members passed a motion to bypass a ballot vote and conduct a voice vote instead.
We're not having a primary, we're not having a caucus. We actually came out early in this year and said we're going to endorse the President of the United States, so we're binding all our delegates.
We have a plan on how we're... The county where this meeting is taking place is Nye County, a county that's been largely red and supportive of the president since early on. Back out here live, the meeting here has ended, and the committee members are now setting their eyes on the national convention. Reporting live from Pahrump, Hector Mejia, 8 News Now.
Hector Mejia in Pahrump. Thank you, Hector. Our Politics Now host and political analyst Steve Sebelius is over at the Review-Journal right now because he's also the politics editor there.
Hi there, Steve. So I know that you're joining us here remotely. Hector's saying in his report they're wrapping up early. What's your reaction to the fact that things have gone fairly smoothly this afternoon?
Yeah, there were some hiccups, Denise, in various places, as there's always going to be in an effort like this. We're talking about a private organization, the Democratic Party, essentially holding an election, and they do it once every 4 years. You got to think right after Iowa, the plan they had to use, that app was abandoned. They had to rewrite their plan in the space of 3 weeks. So given all those factors and given the voter turnout that happened in early voting, it's a daunting task. And so you're going to expect some hiccups, some problems here and there, but it does seem like it's going overall fairly smoothly.
Steve, I'm curious, with Culinary Union 226 and the issues there representing those 60,000 union workers, and looking at Bernie Sanders with early precincts reporting only 3% at this point, but garnering 55% of the vote, are you at all surprised about how successful he has been thus far?
Not really, Brian, because remember in 2016, Bernie Sanders basically split the state with Hillary Clinton. It was a two-person race, and he won nearly half the vote. So he's always been very popular in Nevada. The culinary, you'll notice, while they put out that flyer that said Bernie wants to end culinary health care while other candidates wanted to keep it, you notice they didn't actually endorse, because in addition to being a fairly politically powerful union, they're also a politically savvy union. And I think they saw the writing on the wall where the polls were going, both the Channel 8 poll, the Review-Journal poll, both showed Bernie Sanders ahead. And so instead of endorsing someone like Joe Biden, they simply let their healthcare flyer stand as their statement on that. And it looks like Bernie Sanders is very popular not only in the Hispanic community, but in the community at large. And that culinary non-endorsement, we'll call it, in that flyer really didn't have an effect.
So, Steve, performing well in Nevada really is going to dictate a lot about garnering more support, getting in more donations. Who really needs to pull out a strong showing tonight?
Well, Denise, I think if former Vice President Biden does not come in second place, his campaign is in real trouble. His argument, after all, has always been that he is the electable candidate in places that look like the demographics of America. Nevada was the first test of that, and it looks like Bernie Sanders, who won the very white states of Iowa and New Hampshire, is doing just as well in the very diverse state of Nevada. So if Joe Biden doesn't come in second, and a close second, I think his campaign is in real trouble. We've already seen some issues with his quote-unquote firewall in South Carolina. I think a lot depends on what the voters here in Nevada have done today, and as we learn that, the implications for former Vice President Biden's campaign are very stark.
Steve, not hearing much from Mr. Bloomberg today, of course, not on the ballot, but I'm curious, after that debate, we spoke briefly Wednesday night. What do you see in terms of his repair efforts, and what does he need to do Tuesday night in the debate in South Carolina to rescue what happened to his campaign Wednesday night of this week?
Well, first, Brian, he's got to get out of the political ER that Elizabeth Warren put him in on that debate stage on Wednesday. It was just an absolutely brutal takedown of Michael Bloomberg. I think for his part, I think he really needs to get back into the groove of debating. I don't think he ever was a really great debater, even when he was running the city of New York. But I think he has to adjust his performance to come across as a little more empathetic to the people who used to work for him with those legal settlements, empathetic to some of the other candidates, and come across as, I think, a little bit more relatable than he did on that stage. If he's kind of as standoffish as he was in South Carolina as he was here in Nevada, I don't think he's going to do very well.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be getting any donations from TurboTax anytime soon. Yeah. All right, Steve Sebelius, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. All right, still ahead here in our special coverage of the caucus, our panel is going to weigh in on who has the best ground game in Nevada and the importance of the Latino vote. We'll be back right after this. So this is interesting. Sometimes when they're done putting the number of voters through the caucus math, which is a very complicated process in putting a lot of numbers, there is a tie for a delegate after they round up. And it's a very Nevada way on how they actually do that tiebreaker. So here's a draw for the high card. What they do is they take an unopened deck of cards and then they draw. Just in case they both get the same rank on their card, they actually look at the rank of suites. So here it is by spades, hearts, diamonds, and clubs. And apparently we had an incident just like this at Coronado High School earlier this afternoon.
Yeah, that same thing happened at Coronado High School. There it is. They're ready to take that very Las Vegas process. Happened at Coronado earlier on in the day, Precinct 1411. And they had supporters for Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. So they settled things with a high card draw. Joe Biden's supporters pulled the higher crowd to a round of applause from those assembled. Candidates are taking advantage of every second up until caucusing starts, and they're out this morning. Again, caucusing began at 12 noon today, and we're seeing those early results with 3% reporting in Liberty High School is one of our locations.
And a lot of them battled the rain. The rain is back right now. Let's check in with Alex Backus, who is out in her slicker in the rain tonight with some of that reaction. Hi, Alex.
Hi, guys. Yeah, just a little bit of rain, but that's all right. It's all good here at Liberty High School. And, you know, the process seemed to go really smoothly here. All the volunteers have actually left. So what we can tell you, one of the precincts we were showing you live in our earlier newscast, we got the results from that. And Bernie Sanders had a really strong lead from that precinct. So certainly echoing the statewide results that we are seeing so far. But this was a really busy location, 26 precincts at this one location. And Congresswoman Susie Lee was here. We got to speak with her about the process today and how confident she felt about it. Here's what she told us.
I think that the Nevada Democratic Party is a strong party. They've spent a lot of time training volunteers, a lot of time making sure the system's right. It's a little less high tech, but I think that they have a great process. I mean, look here, it's almost noon, no lines here. I think they're moving the process along. I think we can expect to see some good results with integrity.
So we saw a lot of young voters at this location today. One of them was Cole Harris. He is 17 years old and actually goes to school here at Liberty High School. And here's what he told us about coming out to caucus today with his parents.
I felt it was my civic duty, and it was a really good opportunity to educate myself on political matters.
Yeah, so his first time voting, very excited. You know, the site leader here told us the voter turnout was a little lower here than 2016. In 2016, there were 20,000 voters, 20,000 people who came to caucus. So a lot of people, but she said that may be in part due to all the early voting we had. Live at Liberty High School, I'm Alex Backus. Denise and Brian, back to you.
Thank you, Alex.
We'll be right back.
alignment numbers that are just coming in as we continue our Caucus 2020 coverage with those results coming in. About 3% of precincts reporting at this time, and we're looking at 52% in first place for Bernie Sanders, 16% in second place for Joe Biden, trailing in third Pete Buttigieg with 12%.
Let's see if we've got the remaining top candidates here. This is the delegate count now, so this is a little bit different numbers with Elizabeth Warren here with 10%. I'm sorry, this is the remaining top 6 of the statewide for the final alignment. Elizabeth Warren, as you can see, Tom Steyer, followed by Amy Klobuchar.
And now we'll go to the delegate count statewide. Bernie Sanders, 55%, 450 delegates. At this point, 18% Joe Biden, 10% for Elizabeth Warren. And in 4th, 5th, and 6th place, we see it right here with those numbers. Pete Buttigieg at 9%, Tom Steyer still at 8%, and Amy Klobuchar down at 2%.
So let's bring in our political expert now, Dave Price from Iowa, who is putting that in your rearview mirror and looking down towards Nevada. Any surprises from any of those numbers? I mean, it's still early.
Very early, very dominating so far for Bernie Sanders. So we would presume at this point the battle will be for 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
And it could end up being kind of tight here between Biden, Buttigieg, and Warren. We'll see how that plays out.
And Dave, can you jump in and also explain the final alignment meeting for people that are a little bit unfamiliar with the caucus process?
Yeah, so you go in the first time you make your first alignment, then if your candidate is not viable, you can slide over and choose somebody else. So that's where you get the final alignment. At the end of the day, what's going to matter here, that would be the delegates. So that's where they do the math. That's where a lot of things get complicated. So look at the delegates, see what those numbers are. At the end of the day, those are the delegates that will ultimately move on to the Democratic National Convention in Milwaukee in June. And should there be a super close race where nobody has officially clinched it, the delegates will matter, and that's where the big battle will begin.
All right, all comes down to the numbers. All right, Dave, thanks so much. Stay close by. We'll be right back with more coverage of the Nevada Caucus 2020 right after this.
Yeah, Brian and Denise, as you mentioned, we're here in Vote Central where those votes are being counted as we speak. There's actually a screen here behind me updating people here in the media center about those early precinct results here. As you guys mentioned, Bernie Sanders currently in the lead with just a few precincts reporting about 30, followed by Warren, Buttigieg, and Biden. So here at the voting central location, that's where they're counting these votes, and we saw about a couple hours ago people bringing in their paper materials from those caucus locations. And there are different ways that the volunteers are reporting those results. Again, as I mentioned, bringing them by paper, but they can also call a hotline number and send a text with a photo with those results. And as you can imagine, with more than 2,000 caucus locations, it could take some time for this to happen. Of course, all eyes are on Nevada following the Iowa caucus debacle. The Nevada State Democratic Party originally planned to use the same app as the Iowa caucus. So as you can imagine, all eyes are going to be focused here in the media center as we get more results. For now, reporting live here at the Rio Orco Manna 8 News Now.
Okay, Orco, thank you for that live report.
And we'll be right back after this.
We will keep you updated on the numbers as they're coming in, the final alignment numbers. As we take a look, we have Bernie Sanders with 53%, Joe Biden at 15%, and Pete Buttigieg 11%. Again, these are the final alignment statewide. Elizabeth Warren at 10%, Tom Steyer 7%, and trailing Amy Klobuchar at just 3%.
And Brian, of course, after that, they do the rounding up, they do the caucus math, then they come up with how many delegates each one of these presidential candidates will get. And these are the numbers we're looking at for delegates. This is statewide throughout Nevada. 55% for Bernie Sanders, are essentially picking up 464 delegates at this point in the evening. 18% of the delegate count going to Joe Biden, 9% to Elizabeth Warren. And then rounding out the top 6 here, this is statewide numbers: Pete Buttigieg, Tom Steyer, and Amy Klobuchar.
And those numbers coming in with just 3% of precincts reporting. We have full coverage not only on 8 News Now, but stay with us on 8newsnow.com. We're streaming all of the Nevada caucus coverage, and we'll continue until 7 p.m., as well as the very latest numbers on your 11 p.m. newscast.
And we'll be right back after this.
I think that we need a president that can actually get things done.
8 News Now is your local election headquarters with live team coverage at caucus locations across the valley. Welcome to the Nevada 2020 caucus coverage with your host, Brian Loftus and Denise Valdez.
Good afternoon and welcome back to our caucus day coverage. The eyes of the country certainly on Nevada as Democrats pick their presidential candidates and Republicans too. I'm Denise Valdez.
And I'm Brian Loftus. We have reporters at caucus locations across the Las Vegas Valley at the Rio Hotel and Casino, at the Bellagio, over at Rancho High School, Palo Verde, and more. And we have a studio full of analysts here to help break down all the results as they come in, tell us what it all means as we stay with current and consistent caucus coverage throughout the day and evening. We are going to continue with our live reporters, but first we want to talk a little bit about how a caucus works for those of you kind of confused about the process, and how does early voting get worked into the process. Vanessa Murphy makes it really easy with this animation.
Caucus goers gather and then head to the section of the room for their candidate of choice for what's called the first alignment. Think of it as a first round. Then early votes need to be incorporated. If a candidate does not have 15% of the votes, they do not move on to the next round. Supporters of the remaining candidates can try to convince caucus goers to join them. Then the second alignment takes place. Again, early votes are incorporated. And based on those results, caucus math is done. There is a special formula to use to figure out how many delegates would be assigned for each candidate.
So that's how it works. Now we're going to switch over to more numbers. We're talking about the final alignment numbers, which is really a part of that caucus math process. It's kind of the preview of it. Looking at Bernie Sanders at 53%. Big distance between him and Joe Biden at 15%. Then Pete Buttigieg, 11%. And in slots 4, 5, and 6, you have Elizabeth Warren, 10%, Tom Steyer at 7%, and Amy Klobuchar trailing with 3%.
Now, some caucus locations already know how many delegates they will be awarding. And again, Bernie Sanders with a strong lead with 55%, followed by Joe Biden at 18% and Elizabeth Warren with 9%. There are delegates going to Pete Buttigieg, Tom Steyer, and Amy Klobuchar, but by a far distance from Bernie Sanders.
We are keeping Vanessa very busy in addition to explaining how caucuses work with that cool graphic. She's also provided us live coverage. And Vanessa over at the Rio Hotel and Casino. Hi, Vanessa.
Double-digit win here in Nevada. It's much harder.
Hi there. Now, where we are, we can see a very small number of precincts reporting. You are mentioning some of those results. Now, we saw volunteers coming here to the Rio around 2, dropping off their caucus materials. And again, what that means is results coming in. I'll step out of the way so you can see how we are monitoring these results. Now, a Nevada State Democratic spokesman tells me that would be the final step in the reporting process, those volunteers dropping off their materials. Here's some video from earlier. Also, first at the precinct or caucus location, they call a hotline to report results. Then they take a photo of how they've recorded the results and text that, and then they bring their materials here. Now, by 12:30, we're told about 1,000 volunteers were using the caucus calculators. We did hear concerns about a lack of volunteers at some locations, but a spokeswoman for the Nevada Democrats insists the vast majority of locations were fully staffed with volunteers. The goal was to have 8 at each location. So again, we are standing by here at Voter Central monitoring results. We are hoping to talk with someone from the Nevada State Democratic Party soon. Reporting live at the Rio, Vanessa Murphy, 8 News Now.
Vanessa, thank you so much. What is political coverage without the great George Knapp?
Absolutely. And he is together today with a couple of political analysts in town, Annette Magnus, along with Fernando Romero. George, take it away.
You know, we've been hearing these predictions of doom and gloom from our national media colleagues for the last 2 weeks. It's a combination of, you know, how big of a disaster will it be? Plague of locusts, earthquakes, fire, floods, asteroids striking Earth, apocalypse, something along those lines, somewhere in between. It hasn't worked out that way. I'd sent a text to Harry Reid earlier today, and he sent us a response early this afternoon. He said he predicted Nevada will have an exemplary vote today. It'll make us appear as the Babe Ruth of caucuses after the debacle at Iowa. And knowing Harry Reid, as we all do, that's sort of tongue-in-cheek humor on his. It's not something you put on a locker room wall. He had also said, this is it. You know, even though Nevada now has it down, this is probably it. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're going to probably look at the caucus situation after Iowa, especially because Iowa did so poorly with their caucuses. And we're going to reevaluate. I mean, I think our party shifted here after the Iowa debacle and did the very best they could to make sure that this was a seamless process today, that early vote worked. And yes, there are going to be hiccups along the way, but I think for the most part, they were able to make those adjustments and move our caucus process forward.
So assuming if we do go to a primary, Harry Reid has also hinted that maybe we should be first in the country, that instead of Iowa, it should be Nevada. Would you agree with that?
We should, yeah, because of the input that we've had in the process. And I have to take my hat off, too, to the unions, so much they've done to educate not only their own members, but the surrounding communities. And, I really think that this has been an exemplary caucus. Again, I still don't necessarily agree 100% with it, but we have done a tremendous job.
As we know, by now, most, if not all, the caucuses should be finished. So now the hard part begins.
That's right.
You know, most of us go into journalism so we can avoid math. I think Vanessa Murphy.
Politics, too.
Vanessa Murphy might be the exception of that, but this gets complicated in how this process goes. But I would think that the Democrats would really be careful. I mean, calculate it, finalize it, triple check it before we get any final numbers.
That's 100%. That's why you're only seeing 3% reporting. They're making sure, they're double checking, they're making sure that all of the caucus math was accounted for. They're going through, making sure no mistakes are made. Because again, human error happens. Those are small things that can be corrected. And then they're going to report out those results. And so that's why you're seeing not as many results in right now. It's going to be later into the evening or maybe even tomorrow when those things are reported. But I feel confident that those things will be reported correctly.
Looked like the turnout at many of these places was pretty slow today.
Well,
they had 70,000 people.
Didn't help.
Yeah, 70,000 people that voted earlier. But overall, you think that the numbers will stack up pretty well against the last caucus?
I think they will. Within my mind, I think about 90,000 total would be a good show.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Back to you.
All right, thank you so much, George. I know I went into it to avoid math, so you got that right. Liberty High School is where Alex Backus is. Last time she joined us, she looked like she was live in Seattle, so now she's inside. That's pure logic right there. Take it away, Alex.
Yes. Hi, Brian. Yes, we've moved under an awning, so we are doing a little better. Yeah, talking about voter turnout, that was one of the big questions we had here today was how would all that early voting impact how many folks showed up here at this location and everywhere this morning. And at least at this location, the site lead told us there were significantly less people here than the 2016 caucus. Keep in mind, in 2016, there were about 20,000 people who showed up here, but she does attribute that in part to all the early votes. So at least people were able to go and make their voices heard. At this hour, there is no one left at this location. The volunteers left about a couple hours ago, so smooth sailing as far as we know in terms of counting all those votes here. We did talk to Congresswoman Susie Lee. She was here earlier today passing out some goodies for folks who are waiting to caucus, and here's a bit of what she told us about the process today.
I think that the Nevada Democratic Party is a strong party. They've spent a lot of time training volunteers, a lot of time making sure the system's right. It's a little less high tech, but I think that they have a great process. I mean, look here, it's almost noon, no lines here. I think they're moving the process along. I think we can expect to see some good results with integrity.
And earlier this morning, it was raining pretty hard right before those doors opened, and there was still a long line of people. So it didn't seem, at least, that the rain deterred people from coming out to make their voice heard today. We did see a lot of young people at this location. There were 26 precincts here at Liberty High School and a lot of Bernie supporters, which seems to make sense now seeing those results as they slowly start to trickle in. But that's the latest here from Liberty High School. Brian and Denise, we will send it back to you.
Alex, thank you for that live report.
Yeah, a lot of young people, because if you're going to be 18 by November, you were able to actually caucus today to be part of the process. So that was something nice they did this year. As we head to break, we want to dip in here and show you Amy Klobuchar, who is speaking to supporters at a rally in Minnesota tonight. She has a fundraiser as well this evening. And we'll be back with more coverage of the Nevada Caucus 2020 right after this.
You're working 2 jobs but still struggling
It has been a big day for Nevada Democrats. They have been out caucusing today, but Republicans have already made their decision who their nominee will be, sitting President Donald Trump, of course.
So today, the Nevada Republican Central Committee held a meeting where they voted to give all of their delegates to the president. Hector Mejia is out at the Pahrump Nugget, where that meeting was held earlier today. Hector?
Yeah, that vote was finalized just about 90 minutes ago. A lot of enthusiasm in the crowd. Let's take a listen.
All those in favor of Donald J. Trump, signify by saying aye.
With that vote, Nevada Republicans became the first in the West to award their delegates to President Donald Trump. And joining us live, we have Nevada Republican Party Chairman Michael McDonald. Good afternoon to you, sir. Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you for being here.
So it's a huge day for the GOP today.
Enormous. It was a great day. We had Brad Parscale out here today, the Trump campaign team leader. He is the chairman for the campaign. We're really happy to have him here, plus the entire Trump campaign team here today. I was very emotional about it. It was a great response. You saw the energy, the enthusiasm out of this crowd.
Now the Central Committee is now setting their eyes on the national convention. Just tell us just about how many delegates are at play here.
Well, first we're going to go to we'll have our convention for the state, and that'll be in May. And then we go up to those delegates. Then we'll go on to the national convention. So we have about 25 delegates, and we have 22 alternates. Yeah, so we're all set for that.
Tell us about the process. We had a voice vote versus a ballot vote earlier today.
Correct. You saw it was an acclamation right now. There's so much behind the president. As you see the energy behind it, they want to make sure the president knows that they're 100% behind him. The Republicans in the state are behind him. So that's where everybody came together. This has been a process that happened over the last year. So it wasn't something that happened overnight. So the energy that kept building up to this, and you saw the climax of this at the end. So it was great. They're all going forward, and then now they'll move forward to the state. Out of that convention, we'll have our nominees that go on to the national convention.
Chairman, thank you so much for joining us. And there you go. So today, Nevada Republicans becoming the first in the West to award their delegates to President Donald Trump. We'll have more coverage here on 8 News Now. For now, reporting live from Pahrump, Hector Mejia, 8 News Now.
Republicans in Nevada also feeling very excited because they had the president and the vice president both visiting Las Vegas just this week.
That they are.
Yeah.
We'll be back with much, much more of our continuing caucus coverage on 8 News Now. Stay with us.
Welcome back to our continuous coverage here of Nevada Caucus. There is still one caucus location that is still open. Most of them shut down, did business hours as normal. Yes. It was one of 7 locations on the Strip, so actually workers could take part in the caucus, so it was nice and close to their workplace.
And Kate Houston, one of our reporters, was at the Bellagio earlier. They finished up early, and now Kate back in the newsroom joining us live.
Yes, Brian and Denise, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders both received delegates from that caucus location. Earlier today, there were 51 in total. There were 123 voters that showed up at that location. Each candidate needed 19 in order to be considered viable. At the beginning, we saw groups for Sanders, Biden, and Elizabeth Warren. After the first alignment, Warren did not have enough voters to be considered viable. One of her supporters that we spoke to decided to join Biden's preference group. Now, many of the people at that location were workers from around the Strip.
We don't all work 9-to-5 jobs here. We have a lot of people who work, very different hours, overnight hours. So we wanted to set up caucus sites on the Strip where shift workers could come in, maybe take a little bit of time off of work, caucus, and then get back to work for the employers who are letting them, take a little bit of time off.
In the end, Joe Biden's preference group elected 19 delegates to the county convention. Bernie Sanders' preference group elected 32 delegates. There was an uncommitted group with 2 members, but they will not be electing any delegates to that convention. Back to you.
All right, Kate, thank you. We have a lot more coverage ahead. Stay with us. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
So a strong turnout in the Nevada caucus tonight really could give a presidential candidate a lot of momentum, and 5 or 6 top presidential candidates, really all of them vying for a strong turnout today. But it looks like Bernie Sanders at this point is going to be walking away with a solid lead.
Yeah, his numbers with just 3% of precincts reporting, 55% over Joe Biden at just 18%. Steve is doing double duty today. Steve Sebelius over at the Review Journal, as well as his help with us here on 8 News Now. And Steve, we heard George earlier talking about Nevada at some point being the first to caucus or even being a primary. Do you see, with the challenges that happened in the state of Iowa, do you see that happening in future elections, especially with things seemingly going relatively smoothly today?
Yeah, I think George, as always, is a prophet and is ahead of his time. I think I can see both of those things happening, Brian, both switching from a caucus to a primary, which our poll showed that most voters would like to do. The caucus is clunky and burdensome, and there's complex math. An election is much easier. But I think with the mistakes in Iowa and the fact that Nevada is far more representative of the nation as a whole, I could see Nevada moving up, maybe even into the first position. That might not be too much to hope for. Certainly that is something that former Senator Harry Reid said he would prefer when he was interviewed during his early vote last week.
So, Steve, some of the candidates have already moved on to other states tonight, getting ready for Super Tuesday and for South Carolina. We dipped in a little earlier to hear Amy Klobuchar talking to her supporters in Minnesota. Not having a very good showing so far in Nevada. Is there a certain point after tonight or after South Carolina where we might start to hear some of these candidates maybe deciding that they ought to change course?
Yeah, absolutely, Denise. When you go through the early states, you don't do that well. What happens is there's natural attrition because the fundraising slows down to a trickle. Donors see that you really can't make it. The attention shifts to the candidates who are at the top of the ticket and who are doing well. And so naturally you kind of drop out. We saw some of those candidates drop out even before Iowa and New Hampshire. But certainly the early states definitely will winnow the candidate field very significantly. And I can see candidacies who, people such as Amy Klobuchar, if she doesn't do well in Nevada and in New Hampshire, maybe not making it over to Super Tuesday. I know that we asked this question at the Review Journal. We asked this question of Joe Biden's campaign manager. We were assured he is definitely going to stay in at least until Super Tuesday. Obviously, he hopes to become the nominee. But some other campaigns may not be able to make it that long.
All right, thanks so much, Steve, joining us at the Las Vegas Review Journal from the RJ to Vote Central, which is over at the Rio.
Yeah, Orko Manna has been covering the numbers as they start to come into the central office, and let's get a check with him right now. Orko?
Yeah, Denise and Brian, we just got another update here in the media center, the room here at the Rio. All eyes are actually on that screen up there where there are the results trickling in still at this point. Right now, the latest update that we have is about 90 precincts have been reporting, and as you guys mentioned, Bernie Sanders seems to have quite the lead right now, reporting that he has about 280 county delegates, and that's the number that we're kind of focusing on. There are a bunch of numbers that are being reported at the moment, but the county delegate number is the important one to look at. Again, Bernie Sanders with that big number. Of course, as you guys have been reporting and talking about all afternoon, the big question here is if everything is going to go well, considering what happened in Iowa. And I've been talking to some of my volunteer contacts who were at different precinct locations today, and they're saying pretty much things have been going smoothly. The only issue that they've been seeing are the long lines. But again, other than that, things seem to be going quite well here for the Nevada caucus. We did see some volunteers bring some of their paper materials here to Vote Central to deliver those. Again, they delivered the results that way through calling a hotline as well as texting photos of those results. I also talked to several of the candidates this week, asking them about their concerns or if they have any questions about what will happen here. They've been telling me that they are confident in the Nevada State Democratic Party, but again, there can always be issues when we're using technology. Of course, the app that was used in Iowa was supposed to be used here initially, but that was scrapped, and they've been using iPads with Google Forms. So again, things seem to be moving smoothly here. We, of course, are going to keep an eye on that screen and bringing more updates on results in just a little bit. For now, reporting live at the Rio, Orko Manna, 8 News Now.
Good to hear about those long lines, because 75,000 early voted, and we've been curious how many that total will be, because of course the weather being a bit acclimate today. It's not stopping Joe Biden. He's out at a rally here in Las Vegas. We're going to listen in.
Thank you. Well, y'all did it for me. Now we're going on to South Carolina and win, and then we're going to take this back. I thank everyone who caucused for us, but I particularly want to thank the precinct captains, all our volunteers that are here, all the people who made all those phone calls. By the way, I plan on coming back to win this state outright. Look. You know, I couldn't have done it without, I want to start off, I got to recognize a few of the congresspersons here. You know, Dina Titus has been incredible. There's a guy named Horsford. You ever hear of him? That man can campaign, man. He can camp. I know. I see him right there. You kidding me? You kidding me? And also, you know, there's a fellow named Cardenas from that little state called California. Somebody came over. And Phil Bell. Phil, thank you. Thank you for coming from Texas. Right there. And Hilda Solis. Where's Hilda? She was just there. Maybe she's coming back here. Okay. And so many of you. You know, I tell you what, man. Now come back here. Well, you got it. Well, you're sending me back. I want to tell you something. And we're in Labor's house, man. Labor's house. IBEW stepped up in a big way, as did a bunch of you. Look, we got some of the best union support, I think better than anybody in the whole damn state. But you look, I heard there's some guys called firefighters around here, you know, they've been with us. UTU.
Joe Biden speaking there, talking about, quoting now, a plan on winning this state outright and giving big credit to Representative Stephen Horsford, saying, boy, that man can campaign.
And Dina Titus as well, obviously just by the smile on his face. Joe Biden very pleased with his second place finish so far here in Nevada, and now he moves on to South Carolina. So we'll continue to watch the numbers for you, and any more candidates that are speaking throughout the evening, we'll have them for you right after this break.
Today, of course, we are picking the delegates that will go to the county convention. That county convention will be held on April 18th. There, they will pick delegates to go to the state convention. That is being held on the 30th of May.
Now, at the state convention, Nevada will have 36 national delegates who will be binded to their candidates, and they will be making our state's votes for the president. Now, sometimes when the caucus sites are all done and they're putting the number of voters through that caucus math we keep talking about, there's a tie for delegates. So that's when they have to do a tiebreaker. And here in Nevada, they do it in a very Las Vegas way.
Yeah, it happened earlier today. And so here's the process. The tiebreaker here is a draw for the high card out of an unopened deck, just in case they both get the same rank on their card. The rank of suits from highest to lowest is spades, hearts, diamonds, and clubs.
Well, and as you mentioned it, Brian, it did happen at Coronado High School today. This is it, Precinct 1411. They even had supporters for Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, even and even. So they settled things with the high card drop, and there it is. Joe Biden supporters pulling the higher card. All right, so let's send it over now to our panel of local experts and activists, along with George Knapp, for a little bit of reaction of how things are going so far. George?
Let's talk a little bit about issues, Annette and Fernando. You know, we've seen this poll all day long about what Nevada voters, Democrats, are saying are their key issues. Healthcare, far and away number one. Environment, climate change, number two, which is interesting because a pretty big chunk of the population thinks it's a hoax, doesn't exist. Number three, of course, is UFO disclosure. No, wait, that's my poll. Number three is the economic issues, which, you know, it's going to be fundamental when it comes to the big election in November, where those the two different parties see things. Is health care the winning issue for Democrats?
Absolutely. It has been for the past two election cycles. We often see healthcare, prescription drugs, and education as the top three issues, regardless of gender, regardless of race. So we know that people care deeply about these issues, and so those are usually the top three. And so climate change being on there also impacts healthcare, and those are intersectional issues. And so we know that people care that the planet is starting to burn up, and that we may not have a hospitable home coming soon. And so that obviously is at the top of people's minds as well.
Economic issues, of course, Fernando, you know, you have two fundamentally different versions of what the numbers might mean. You know, economy's going great, things are great, jobs are up.
It is going great, but one thing I question as an example, they said, you know, the unemployment rate is at 3.0, whatever you, yet homelessness is the biggest that we've ever seen. We're experiencing that. We're experiencing the high rate of rent rates in the area. So people cannot afford to eat. They cannot afford to live, you know, anywhere. So consequently, we have streets full of undocumented, the homeless.
For the candidates here, the Democrats running for president in the Nevada caucus, the health care issue becomes more complicated. They're proposing pretty broad coverage, but they find themselves up against the culinary union, a very powerful force in Nevada politics and in the approach. How do you analyze that?
Well, I think here's what's going on. Yes, the unions need to be able to absolutely protect the health care that they fought for and collectively bargained for, 100%. But we know in this country that there's a lot of folks who still don't have coverage or who need coverage. Or the ACA is just not giving them enough. And so what they're looking for is more. And whether it's a public option or Medicare for all, that's what we're seeing is kind of resonating with people across the board. I know here at the state level, we're currently exploring whether or not to have a state option. There's actually a study being done right now to have a public option in the state of Nevada and maybe what that could look like. So these are the types of things that Nevada voters want us to be looking at and want us to be exploring. And so that's why you're going to continue seeing this being a #1 issue.
We just heard from Joe Biden speaking about what looks like it's going to be a second place finish, although it's still pretty early. Is this exactly what his campaign needed, sort of a jolt? Because up until now, it's looked like a Bernie Sanders runaway.
Well, it is a shot in the arm for him, and he needs it for his campaign. And really, I feel that I'm a little surprised that he wasn't higher up, as it were. I mean, he had really good people supporting him, and Dina Titus and Bob Kaufman. And we had Ivana Cancela also giving it all she had. but again, coming in second is not bad.
Do you have any idea? Would you make a guess on when we're going to see actual final numbers and the delegates assigned?
It's hard to know when that's going to happen because again, we've talked about it. They're going through their process right now and they're making sure that all of the vote totals are coming in. I know that right now they're probably still getting boxes from the precincts, so all of the stuff that's being wrapped up in those caucus locations are now being taken back to the party. So there's a lot now that has to go on behind the scenes to make sure that we get this process right. So it's going to be a while, and we need to be patient.
Could it be tonight? Could it be tomorrow?
I think so, absolutely. I think, you know, we hopefully will not have the Iowa situation that occurred, and so I think we should probably start seeing some results soon, and that's why you're only seeing 3% right now.
Fernando Romero, Annette Magnus, thanks for being here with us during our coverage. Appreciate it. Back to you.
All right, George, thank you. And we're back with just a couple minutes on 8 News Now with our continuing caucus coverage. Our Nevada caucus coverage continues on this Saturday afternoon. The Trump campaign issuing a statement on the Democratic caucus. Media reports of unstaffed caucus sites in Nevada just proved that the National Democratic Party is in chaos and incompetent. Even with that mess, there is no denying that big government socialism dominated again as Bernie Sanders remained the leader of the leftist pack. And here are the final alignment numbers that are coming in. Let's take a look at the screen together. You can see Bernie Sanders is running away at 50%. Joe Biden second at 16%. We're going to have Dave and Denise talk about why that's so important for Joe to be in second place. Trailing Elizabeth Warren, Tom Steyer, and Amy Klobuchar all below 10%. And the delegates statewide, Bernie Sanders 54%, Joe Biden about the same place at 17%, same place as the alignment numbers, Elizabeth Warren 10%. And then in single digits, Pete Buttigieg, former mayor of South Bend at 9%, Tom Steyer, who spent some $16 million in the state of Nevada at 7%, and Amy Klobuchar, who tonight is at a fundraiser in Minnesota standing at 3%. And we are going to now switch over to Dave and Denise and talk a little bit about why number 2 for Biden is actually a good thing.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So we're talking with Dave Price, our political analyst from Iowa, and he's been crunching the numbers for us. And we watched a very ecstatic Joe Biden. I'm very pleased with the second place finish. This was really a critical place for him to do well in. You've got some numbers here you want to break down for us. Why is he so ecstatic with second place?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about politics, isn't it? You get second place and you're jumping up and down for joy. But if you look at the broader theme about where these numbers have gone, and Real Clear Politics puts all these together. So keep in mind the green here. If you go way back to when they were starting to track this, last year, Biden far and away the front runner here, right? Then you can see it was a steady decline, went up, and then boom, kind of the crater going all the way to the end here. That's about the Iowa caucus time, all right? So that trajectory was not what he wants.
Right.
So he comes away today. If he does hold on and get a second, he's thinking, hey, that's not too bad. Compare that to Bernie Sanders. So he's in blue. He was second going way back, but there was a significant gap between them. So he had kind of slow and steady, straight across, and then right before Iowa, so this is basically December, look what he's done, straight up here. And now with his strong performance today, you would expect that's even going to go even higher. If you look for third, Warren has kind of been a little bit all over the place. So she was sort of steady going across, and then was going in the wrong direction, and then got a little boost here in December and then leading into Iowa. She would really like to bump her way up to third when this day is all done here.
Sure. And then every time there's a debate, too, there is a little bit of a bump depending on their performance.
No doubt.
And how they're doing with the electorate.
And unfortunately for her, because of the way with the early caucusing here, so many folks showed up and caucused early, and her debate performance will not be reflected in that because they had already made their selection. So unless she is incredibly dominant today, she may not get the burst out of Nevada that she probably deserves.
All right, Dave Price from our affiliate in Iowa looking at the Real Politics numbers, and we do have a lot more Real Politics numbers for you coming up right after this break.
Welcome to Caucus 2020. If you're just turning on the television, results just coming in at the very latest, about 4% of precincts officially reporting. And we're going to take a look at some of those results.
Yeah, Dave Price from our affiliate in Des Moines, Iowa, is looking at some of those numbers with us as well. And at this early part of the night, with just 4% of the precincts reporting, it looks like Bernie Sanders is walking away with a very comfortable lead when it comes to the delegate count. So this is the final alignment. This is not the actual delegates, but this is sort of like the last round before they actually assign the delegates. And Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like 50% for Bernie, 17% for Joe Biden, and 12% for Pete Buttigieg.
And you use those numbers to eventually do the math to get you to the county delegates here. But this is what we talked about early on, where the early numbers had shown Tom Steyer in third. That would defy the trend if he would finish that strongly. And he's starting to fade here, fading his way toward Amy Klobuchar, which is not where you want to be here when the night is done. But we're seeing Pete Buttigieg going in the right direction. It's been a solid Sanders out front, far and away above everybody, and then Biden a very solid number 2. And then we're seeing Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren most likely battling for that 3 and 4.
We ought to mention here that CBS News is expected to break into programming at some point, obviously with an announcement about the caucus. When that happens, we will bring it to you right away. But meantime, let's just continue the discussion about what's going on here statewide and in Clark County.
Steyer spent $16 million here in the state of Nevada. He spent the most of any of the candidates, and they trailed significantly in the amount of $1 or $1.5 million. So he really needed to bring it home here in terms of numbers, and in South Carolina next week. So early results, his team, what do you think they're reflecting on?
As we know, his wallet is thick. He has about $2 billion in his fortune that he's amassed over the years, but a very poor performance in Iowa despite the money spent.
I'm going to quickly interrupt you, and I apologize for doing that, but just hearing from our executive producer, AP is calling it for Bernie Sanders and a special report.
This is a CBS News special report. I'm Rena Ninan in New York. CBS News projects Senator Bernie Sanders is the winner of today's Nevada Democratic caucuses. Sanders has a big lead over his campaign rivals, as you can see. Former Vice President Joe Biden and former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg are likely to come in second and third place, as Senators Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar round out the top 5. Once again, the state party has been slow to tabulate and release official results. Our entrance poll reporters are telling us that some confusion has been seen at precincts, as well as discrepancies in the counts. But some caucuses sites have also faced volunteer shortages. Senators Bernie Sanders also ready to move on, campaigning today in El Paso, Texas, as Joe Biden, who's not yet met early expectations for his campaign, heads to South Carolina. The next contest in the Democratic presidential primary. Again, Senators Bernie Sanders is projected to win today's Democratic caucuses in Nevada. So the race rolls on Tuesday. Democrats meet to debate in South Carolina here on CBS ahead of that state's primary on Saturday. Super Tuesday follows on March 3rd with over 1,300 delegates at stake. Well, our coverage continues on our 24-hour streaming network, CBSN, and later on your late local news. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Rena Ninan in New York. And welcome back to our continuing coverage of Nevada Caucus 2020. Let's show you some video from some of the caucusing earlier in the day. This is over at Rancho High School, where they had a number of precincts spilling over into classrooms, spilling over into gymnasiums. But overall, it seems like most places had a couple hiccups. You know, as people register in the morning at 10 o'clock, they actually start caucusing at noon. But at least for the most part here at Rancho High School, things went fairly smoothly.
They practiced and prepared for this day. This is Palo Verde High School. And also you see the line of people. Good to see, because remember, early voting numbers at 75,000. Curious to see exactly how many caucused and voted today. Early estimates somewhere in the range of 15 to 20,000. We'll know those numbers later on. And in addition to the high schools, also caucusing happened on the Strip.
Yeah, the Democratic Party wanted to make sure that all of their workers or anyone who might have worked for the union or whatnot would have an opportunity to actually vote. So they set up this particular caucus site at the Bellagio, and things, they were one of the first places to actually be done today.
From the Bellagio to our friends at the RJ, Steve Sebelius is on hand, and he's got the very latest, as he is also the politics editor there, so kind of doing double duty. And Steve, are you surprised at all about just how vast the lead is, and also how celebratory Biden was about second place?
No, neither, and it's still early. We're still seeing those numbers come in. So the real question is going to be Biden in second place, but by how much? How strongly does he perform when all the votes are counted? It's really no surprise Bernie Sanders winning. He did well in 2016 in a two-person race against Hillary Clinton, almost won half the votes of the state. So he was always going to perform strongly here. His staff here, very good staff, did a very good job organizing, and he just generates a lot of voter excitement here. So Joe Biden being in second place, again, not surprising, but we're really going to be wanting to see how strongly he performed. The former vice president knew if he didn't do well here, it was going to be the end of his campaign. And so Nevada, in a way, by giving him second place, has breathed a little bit of wind into his sails as he goes into South Carolina.
So, Steve, with just the last minute or so left here, both CBS News and the Associated Press reporting that Bernie Sanders is walking away with this one tonight. He must be feeling pretty good about his first place finish here in Nevada.
Yeah, absolutely. He is definitely feeling good about his victory here, and it helps him. He won in Iowa, he won in New Hampshire, now he's won in Nevada. That's 3 states in his column, and Super Tuesday on the horizon.
Early results disappointing for Pete Buttigieg, especially after doing so well in Iowa and New Hampshire. Steve, we're going to check in with you again a little bit later and get more political expertise and updates from you. And I want to remind all of you, in addition to being on air on 8 News Now, we are also streaming our coverage on 8newsnow.com. Our social media team is constantly tweeting from locations across the valley on our 8 News Now Twitter handle. So stay with us online as well.
As we had to break, another look at some of the final alignment numbers. Be right back.
Voters turning out for the Nevada caucus.
It is up to us in 2020.
The candidates have voiced what matters to them in the race for the White House.
We need a progressive agenda. Medicare for all.
We're going to have to take him on the economy.
Climate change is an existential crisis.
Making sure America's voice is heard.
Let's bring as many people in and get as much help to the American people as we can.
We need to restore the integrity of the presidency, of the office of the presidency.
And it comes down to Nevada's vote.
Good evening and welcome in here at 5 o'clock. The political spotlight is on our state this weekend as Democrats choose their presidential nominee. Thanks for joining us. I'm Denise Valdez.
And I'm Brian Loftus. We've been following the caucus results, and just coming in, we have CBS News and Associated Press declaring Bernie Sanders the winner in Nevada. We'll have more of the numbers in a second. We also have been covering events across the valley. Orko Manna is at the election headquarters at the Rio, Kate Houston, and Sasha Loftus at Valley Campaign Events.
And back in the studio, we have analysts here to help break down these results for us and tell us what it all means. Right now, we'll take a look at some of the final alignment numbers that we're seeing both statewide and here in Clark County.
And those alignment numbers just coming in, kind of the numbers before the caucus math gets you those final statewide delegate results. You can see that big lead. Bernie Sanders at 15%, Joe Biden at 17%, Mayor Pete Buttigieg at 11%, followed by those that had more of a disappointing finish. Elizabeth Warren also at 10%, then single digits for Tom Steyer, who spent $16 million in Nevada, and 5% for Amy Klobuchar.
So once these the final alignment or the sort of the second round numbers are done, then they figure out exactly how many delegates each one of these presidential candidates has. And that's the numbers you're looking at now. These are statewide with just 4% of the precincts in. But again, CBS News and Associated Press already saying that Bernie Sanders is walking away with this with 54%. Joe Biden, though, very pleased with his 18% finish in second place. Elizabeth Warren at 10%. And then we look at the other top three, rounding out the top six, I should say, with Buttigieg, Steyer, and Klobuchar.
And that news about Bernie Sanders being declared the winner just coming in live on air about 4:45 to 4:50 p.m. We bring it to you there at the top. The Bernie Sanders camp also holding an event in downtown Las Vegas over at Rebar. Sasha Loftus there now to tell us about the celebratory event in the face of this victory.
Yes, Denise and Brian, definitely a lot of celebrating going on down here at Rebar in downtown Las Vegas in the Arts District. You can see, if you look behind me here, quite a few people outside and inside with a lot of Bernie Sanders shirts. There's a van here with all that Bernie theme going on. Definitely a lot of people we spoke with say they're pretty happy about these results. They've been happy all day, even before it was official, because as we've mentioned, that Bernie had pretty much a lead most of the day. Now, earlier today, we have some video of the location. We were at one of the big voting locations at Rancho High School. 11 precincts met there, and Bernie was in the lead for all of them, at least for most of them other than two. We're told that Steyer and Biden did split with him on one of those districts, but those were just a couple of people. So overall, they say that Bernie got all of the delegates in that area as well. Now, earlier at that location, we spoke with Governor Steve Sisolak about how great the turnout has been for early voting and for voting today. We also spoke with a voter who was all for Bernie. Take a listen.
I'm thrilled with the numbers that we've got coming in, and I'll let Jason speak to it as well, but people are taking an interest. I mean, some people wanted to wait till today. They didn't vote early on purpose because they wanted to be able to interact with their neighbors, and they wanted to have the potential of becoming a delegate, so that they waited till today, and they've been looking forward to it, and it's going to be exciting.
Now back out here live. Definitely, again, a lot of people celebrating outside Rebar. There are actually two separate bars connected here. There is Davies Rebar and then the Rebar bar, and people are just kind of packed into both of them. We'll try to get inside one here. We couldn't really get inside with our equipment earlier because it was so crowded. We will, of course, bring you updates. Again, a lot of people celebrating that Bernie Sanders is the official winner of the Nevada caucus. But for now, reporting live downtown, Sasha Loftus, 8 News Now.
Sasha, thank you for that. So on the other end of the spectrum is a fourth place finish for the former mayor out of Indiana, Pete Buttigieg. His supporters are having an event right now also in Las Vegas. We understand that's going on at the Springs Preserve. This is just in the video you're looking at, a live look. Let's dip in and let's listen to his reaction.
I congratulate my competitors on a vigorous campaign here in Nevada.
And I congratulate Senator Sanders on a strong showing today, knowing that we celebrate many of the same ideals. But before we rush to nominate Senator Sanders in our one shot to take on this president, let us take a sober look at what is at stake for our party, for our values, and for those with the most to lose. There is so much on the line.
That is Pete Buttigieg being very diplomatic, congratulating Bernie Sanders on a strong finish today, but also being wary of, let's not get too far ahead of the race here.
And he had so much success in Iowa and New Hampshire in terms of a second-place finish and possibly a first-place finish, as Iowa is going to continue to do some recounting this week starting on Tuesday, but Buttigieg finishing with just 9% here, fourth place behind Elizabeth Warren, who is at 10%, and of course Bernie and Biden at the top.
So a lot of results are still being monitored, still coming in. There is a central hub where all these delegates, or I should say the votes, are being tallied. That is going on at the Rio Hotel and Casino.
And the I-Team's Vanessa Murphy is there live right now. Vanessa?
Yeah, results are slowly trickling in here, and this is where caucus volunteers drop off their caucus materials in the final step of the reporting process. Now, we have heard there were some issues integrating early voting at caucus locations. This was the first time ever early voting took place ahead of a caucus. Nearly 75,000 Nevadans early voted, according to the state Democratic Party. That contributed to shorter lines today. Now, I just checked with a volunteer we talked with on Monday during early voting in Anthem. This is video of Wendy Linow helping with that 3 to 4 hour line. She just told me today there was a short line where she was today, and her precinct ran smoothly.
You feel prepared as a volunteer?
Yes, very much so. I've had at least 15 to 17 hours of training already, lots of reading on my own. We're going to get our box with the iPads for the caucus. We're getting those tomorrow night, and then we'll have a meeting and a training, you know, as long as necessary until Saturday morning.
And that's what Wendy Linow told us Monday. And today, here is a photo from the results at her location. She says 21 people were in the room. Integrating early votes meant a total of 179 votes for the precinct. And here are more photos from her location. She says she was the caucus chair, so she was the one using the caucus calculator and tallying those results. Now, she also tells me the caucus calculator actually corrected a mistake she made. Another reason why she feels good about the technology that it corrected her. She also tells me right now she is home having a glass of wine now that it is all finished. Over here at the Rio, we are continuing to monitor results. Reporting live at the Rio, Vanessa Murphy, 8 News Now.
We'd all like to join her.
Just going to say, very well deserved and a big sigh of relief, I'm sure, for all of those precinct captains. So the polls might be closed, but tonight the reaction is starting to roll in now that Bernie Sanders has been clearly announced as the winner here in Nevada.
Yeah, tonight former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete Buttigieg is holding a rally at the beautiful Springs Preserve. Kate Houston hustled over there, joining us live.
Yes, Brian and Denise, Buttigieg is actually still speaking behind me. Very large cheers from the crowd. Right now, they are awaiting those final results. Now, earlier today, I was actually at the Bellagio, where 51 delegates were elected to Bernie Sanders and to Joe Biden. Now, the Strip locations did differ from others in the area. Early votes were not counted there. They were sent to their respective precincts. Today, Nevada Democrats said that the Strip locations were an opportunity for workers with different shifts or odd hours to go and vote. 123 voters showed up supporting Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren. After the first alignment, Warren was not considered viable, and I spoke to one of her supporters who actually decided to go with Biden instead of Sanders.
It's just too far to the left for me, kind of the process where they're looking at. I don't think it'd work in this country right now. I think that we need to have it more, we need a delegate that's more centered, so where they can work on both sides.
Now, Joe Biden's preference group was elected 19 delegates. Bernie Sanders' preference group Trump was elected 32 delegates. It's important to note that many of the people at the Bellagio location were workers on the Strip, many of them union members. They decided to vote for Bernie despite the recent controversy between Bernie and the Culinary Union over their health care. Now, there was also an uncommitted group with 2 members. They did not receive any delegates to send to the county convention later on this year. Now, we're going to be here at this Pete Buttigieg rally, listening to what else he has to say, and hopefully have some more updated information for you coming up at 6 o'clock. Reporting live from Springs Preserve, Kate Houston, 8 News Now.
And Kate, Nevada Republicans are not holding a caucus. The Central Committee met in Pahrump today where they voted to bind their delegates to President Trump. Nye County has been largely red and supportive of the president since very early on. The local committee now has their eyes set on the national convention.
So much rain this morning. The main event early this morning. However, we have been seeing passing rain bands throughout the day, too, even some thunderstorms as well. Live look outside. Plenty of cloud cover when you knew that was going to happen. Temperatures cooled off nicely, too. Look at these rain bands that passed through. Brought some pea-sized hail to Summerlin, also the mid part of the valley. Strong storms at times, but mainly we've been seeing those strong storms down towards Kingman. The winter weather advisory canceled for the Las Vegas Valley, but still continues up there on Lincoln County. Temperatures tonight in the 50s with also chances for showers continuing. Back to sunshine for tomorrow. 8 News Now will continue after this brief timeout.
You're looking live at the Texas flag and a lot of people that are in a very celebratory mood as they celebrate the victory declared by CBS News and the Associated Press of Bernie Sanders. This is in El Paso, Texas. Bernie really running away from it in Nevada. We'll continue to crunch the numbers for you on air on 8 News Now and on 8newsnow.com. But Bernie celebrating tonight. You can see the many Bernie signs as he came out with a significant lead over second-place finisher at this point with early precincts reporting of Joe Biden. Now, one man very familiar with caucuses, political director from our affiliate in Des Moines, Iowa, Dave Price. He's been here all day helping us navigate our coverage. And Dave, what are you seeing so far in terms of the numbers and also talking about the comparisons of the states?
Yeah, maybe a few things stick out as to why Bernie Sanders is doing so well. All right, as you drop back at this, Iowa and Nevada, essentially the same population-wise overall. Then they'll start drilling down a little bit. Iowa is slightly older when you're talking about the 65 and older crowd, which is in part why it has a good reputation of those who actually show up to vote in elections. When you're talking about how much money they bring home, it's pretty much the same as well. All right, a couple other things that sort of stick out here, and maybe this gets at why Bernie Sanders has done so well in this state. When you're looking at people who do not have health insurance, so it's roughly around 6% in Iowa, but it's more than twice that much in Nevada. Now, when you break things down by race, this is where the differences are very stark. Iowa is a very, very white state, about 90% white. And the Hispanic population, Latino population, only about 6%. It's 4 to 5 times as much as you know in this state.
Yes, significant.
Bernie Sanders very strong in Iowa with that smaller sect of people, but the pot's a lot bigger, that community a lot bigger in Nevada, and it would appear that he's doing very strong.
With our larger Hispanic population, African American population, and Asian population, Nevada really the first state that looks like America, always pivotal in terms of helping us dictate maybe which way the country will go.
Right, far more diverse. Now, Iowa, of course, will stick up for itself and say that as a rule among the Democrats, it usually nails this, though, usually picks the caucus winner. The winner of the caucus ends up becoming the nominee. In recent past, will tell you that almost the last 15 to 20 years. We'll see, because we don't even know who won Iowa, whether it's Bernie Sanders or Pete Buttigieg, but one of those two.
Dave's going to stay with us. Dave, thank you for lending your expertise, and we're going to be back on 8 News Now in a matter of minutes.
I'm talking about a 10% tax cut for everybody who makes less than $250,000. I'm talking about rebuilding America in a climate-smart way, which will produce over 4.5 million good-paying union jobs and raise wages across the country. And I'm talking about doubling the minimum wage. The minimum wage is $7.25 in the United States of America. That's an insult to working people. We have an economy that for 40 years has worked well for rich people and hasn't worked at all for working people. It's time. These corporations have bought the government. They own the government. I'm running as an outsider to take back the government. For 10 years, I've been putting together coalitions of Americans to take on those corporations, and we've never lost. I want to move to Washington, D.C., break this corporate stranglehold, put in term limits of 12 years for Congress people and senators, and get a government that works for the American people again. Mr. Trump says the economy's strong. No one ever contradicts him. And it is strong for his rich friends, but it is not strong for working people. People are suffering in this country, and he's going to make them suffer more.
Okay, thank you so much. We have Tom Steyer there earlier. Now we have Bernie live. We mentioned that event in El Paso, Texas, Denise, and there we see Bernie joined by his wife.
So a moment ago, we were looking at the warm-up, and once he got on the stage, boy, that whole crowd just erupted, learning that he has walked away with a huge victory tonight in Nevada Caucus 2020. As he sort of enjoys the accolades, let's listen in.
Thank you, San Antonio. And let me introduce to you the next First Lady of the United States, Jane Sanders. You will be very proud of her as First Lady. You know, based on what I have seen today in Texas, we were in El Paso, we're here now. Don't tell anybody. I don't want to get them nervous. We are going to win the Democratic primary in Texas. And you know, this is also important. The president gets very, very upset easily. So don't tell him that we're going to beat him here in Texas. And now I'm delighted to bring you some pretty good news. I think all of you know we won the popular vote in Iowa. We won the New Hampshire primary. And according to 3 networks in the AP, we have now won the Nevada Caucus.
But you can get away with it.
Or the office phone or the office phone will ring.
Yes.
Okay, I got you.
Yep.
at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and for the third time today, we're dealing with the rain. We're currently in a rain delay for the Boyd Gaming 300. I'm going to welcome in Jeff Motley. Can you give us an update? We see the Air Titans out there on the track now. What is the update?
The update is we do have the Air Titans on the track. We're making every effort we can to dry the track right now. We really would like to get this race in this evening. We've gotten the first stage done. The race would be an official race after stage 2, but we want to get the entire 200 laps in tonight.
And we knew it was coming. Were you guys prepared for this as far as knowing, we knew the rain was coming? You guys were ready to go.
We were ready to go. I mean, obviously you can see by having the track drying efforts that we've got underway, we knew that was coming. So we were completely prepared for the rain. But obviously, when it is raining, there's only so much you can do. So you can only wait until it stops to really start trying to dry the track.
And you mentioned we're currently in stage 2, 50 laps in, 90 laps, it's official. Is that the goal right now, or would you like to see a full race?
Well, the goal is always to run a full race. So what we really want to do is run all 300 miles of the Boyd Gaming 300. So that is the only goal that we're thinking of. I'm just telling you what the rules are. It says that if we complete stage 2, then it's an official race.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. That is the latest here at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway on Boyd Gaming 300. Reporting live, Kevin Martin, 8 Sports Now.
All right, Kevin, thank you so much. We'll quickly glance at the delegate numbers right now. We just have a little bit of time with you. Bernie Sanders, 54%. Joe Biden, second place, 18%. Elizabeth Warren at 10% in our continuing caucus coverage.
We'll see you back here at 6 o'clock.
happening right now.